He said it the way you say something you think is a compliment. Mom, honestly, you'd be perfect for this. You're so good at cleaning. You could just keep things running smoothly on the day, make sure everything's tidy, help the caterers reset the tables. My son, 29 years old, standing in my kitchen on a Sunday with a mug of coffee I had made for him, talking to me in the easy tone of a man who has solved a problem that was bothering him and is pleased with the solution. He'd driven over that morning specifically for this conversation. That's the detail I keep coming back to. He didn't call. He drove over, sat at my kitchen table, ate the eggs I made, waited until we were on coffee, and then brought it up, which meant he'd thought about it beforehand, which meant this was not an impulsive comment. He'd considered how to ask me, and this was what he'd landed on. "Walk me through it," I said. "What exactly are you picturing?" He leaned forward. "So Kelsey's mom has all the guest coordination, the family photos, greetings, all of that. And the hotel has the vendor stuff, the catering timeline and everything. But there's this gap, like a behind-the-scenes role, someone keeping track of whether the bathrooms are stocked, whether the cocktail hour transition goes smoothly, whether the caterers have what they need. We just need someone organized who knows how to deal with service staff. Someone organized who knows how to deal with service staff." "And you thought of me," I said. "You'd be so good at it," he said, the warmth of a man who means it as a compliment. "You're so capable. You notice everything. And honestly, you're better at this kind of thing than anyone I know." "This kind of thing." I set my mug down, very carefully. "You want me to be the maid," I said. "Not a question." He made a face. "Not a maid, just, you know." I looked at my son, this man I had raised, and I thought about 31 years of showing up, and I thought about the building 3 miles away, and I thought about who exactly held the power in this conversation, and then I smiled. "Okay," I said. "I'll take care of everything." 31 minutes later, I was in my car, on the phone with my assistant director, and everything was taken care of. Just not the way Jamie had in mind. Before I tell you what happened at that wedding, subscribe right now. This channel is for every woman who built something with her hands and her years and her mind, and still got handed the mop at the one event that was supposed to honor her. Hit subscribe, come back, because what I did in those 31 minutes took 31 years to earn the right to do. My name is Gloria Tran. I was 56 that year, and I had been in the hotel industry since I was 22, starting as a room attendant at a mid-range property in Sacramento, pushing a cart down hallways while my son slept at my mother's apartment 2 bus rides away. So yes, I am good at cleaning. I am also the general manager of the Alderton Grand, which is a 412-room luxury property with 3 event spaces, 2 restaurants, a rooftop bar, and a staff of 219 people who report, directly or indirectly, to me. Jamie's wedding was booked in my largest ballroom. He didn't know I ran it, not because I had hidden it, but because he had never asked. That is the thing I keep coming back to, the fact that carries more weight than any single conversation. In 29 years, my son had never once asked me what I did for a living, beyond the general category of hotels. There was a moment, 2 years before the wedding, when I understood clearly that he didn't know. He'd been at the Alderton for a colleague's birthday dinner, in the private dining room, and he'd texted me afterward to say the food was great and the service was super professional. Super professional, like he was leaving a review. I'd written back, "I'm glad," without saying why I was glad, and then I sat with my phone for a while in my kitchen, thinking about what it meant that my son could eat in my restaurant and text me to say the service was nice, without it occurring to him to wonder why I might care more than usual about the answer. It meant 2 things. He hadn't connected the hotel to me, and somewhere along the way I had stopped making the connection available to connect. Those are not the same failure, and they are not the same repair. His was about not looking. Mine was about making it too easy not to. I thought about calling him that night. About saying, "By the way, the restaurant you were in is mine. The dining room you sat in, the service that impressed you, all of it runs because I run it. Would have taken 30 seconds. I didn't call. I was tired, and I had an early meeting, and I told myself it would come up naturally. It didn't come up naturally for 2 more years. It came up when he handed me a bucket and a cloth and told me I'd be perfect for the job. That's the thing about waiting for the natural moment. Sometimes the natural moment is a Sunday morning in your own kitchen, with your son asking you to clean his wedding venue. He knew hotels. He knew I wore business clothes to work and came home tired. It meant he'd never thought to put those 2 things together. It meant I'd been so invisible about the work for so long that the hotel and the mother occupied separate parts of his mind that had never been introduced. Part of that was my doing. The habit of not announcing, of letting the work be the work and the family be the family, of not needing people to know. Part of it was something I'd learned to do so early and so thoroughly that I didn't even notice I was doing it anymore. But part of it was simply that he hadn't tried to know, and I had stopped expecting him to try. I had never made a point of it. This is my own thing to own. I am not a person who announces. I learned early in my career that a woman in hotel management who talks about her role is heard differently than a man who does the same, and I got tired of being heard the wrong way, so I learned to let the work speak and let the conversation find other topics. The work had spoken for 31 years. My son had simply never listened. Let me tell you about those 31 years, because they matter, and because they're the reason the 31 minutes meant anything at all. I started at 22, as I said, a room attendant, which means exactly what it sounds like. I cleaned rooms, beds, bathrooms, floors, surfaces, the entire physical evidence of strangers having lived somewhere for a night. I was fast and I was thorough, and I had the particular orientation toward a well-made environment that some people are born with, and some people develop, and some people never understand at all. A room that is right has a feeling you can sense when you walk in. Everything in its position, every surface carrying only what it's supposed to carry. I could make a room feel like that in under 24 minutes. The standard was 32. What those years were, behind the work, was a long calculation. I had a son who was 2 when I started, and every professional decision I made was made in the context of him. The long Friday shift I picked up meant my neighbor Patricia would give Jamie dinner. The training weekend meant my mother would drive 4 hours. The promotion meant a 10% raise, and I could stop choosing between the grocery store and the pharmacy on the same week. I carried that calculation so quietly that nobody in the job knew I was carrying it. Not because I was ashamed, because the floor needed to be clear to do the work. You can't be both the person struggling and the person solving the problem at the same time, not when guests are waiting and rooms need to be right. So I kept the floor clear, and I kept the personal weight somewhere else, and the work got done. Jamie grew up in the results of all of that. He never saw the work itself. I protected him from it so completely that when he was old enough to be curious, there was nothing visible to be curious about, just a mother who wore business clothes and came home tired. The gap between that image and general manager was a gap I'd built too clean for him to see where it started. My supervisor at that first property was a woman named Mrs. Okafor, who is the reason I am where I am. She was 53 when I was 22, Nigerian-born, with the specific authority of a person who has never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She wore the same button-down and khaki slacks every day, her name badge straight and level in the way of someone who treats small things as a statement of larger values. She noticed that I was fast. More importantly, she noticed that I was thinking, which is a different and rarer thing. She would find me after my shift sometimes and ask why I'd made a certain choice, why I'd reorganized the supply cart that way, why I'd flagged a room for maintenance before it was obviously necessary. I gave her real answers, not modest ones, and she gave me real feedback, not encouraging ones. The difference mattered. There was an afternoon in my 3rd month when I'd finished my rooms 40 minutes early and spent the remaining time deep cleaning a shared corridor that wasn't on my assignment. Mrs. Okafor found me there and stood watching for a moment. before she said anything. "Why?" she asked. I thought about it. Because it was between my rooms and the next room attendants' rooms, and guests walk it either way. It seemed like the right place to put the extra time. She nodded once. That nod meant more than a performance review. Within 18 months, she had me in a supervisor role, which is fast in that industry, which she knew was fast, which is why she gave it to me then, and not later. I worked my way up slowly. Not as slowly as I might have, because I was paying attention the whole time, asking the questions Mrs. Okafor had taught me to ask. Why is this process done this way? What would happen if we did it differently? What does the guest actually experience versus what we think they experience? Those years were not easy, and I am not going to pretend they were. I was a single mother for most of them, my son at my mother's apartment on the long shifts, and with a neighbor named Patricia on the short ones, and the mental math of that, of always knowing exactly where he was, and what it cost, and whether I could cover it, ran underneath every professional decision I made for 15 years. I was not just building a career. I was building the container that would hold Jamie's life until he was old enough to build his own. 10 years in, I had an operations manager title. 15 years in, I was on the leadership team of a mid-scale property in the Bay Area. 20 years in, I had my first general manager role at a 200-room business hotel outside Phoenix. The Phoenix property I'm particularly proud of because it was hard, and hard things that go right mean more than easy things that go right. The previous GM had left morale in pieces, quality scores in the basement, and a staff that had learned to do the minimum because nobody had given them a reason to do more. I walked that property for a week without changing a single thing, just listening, eating in the restaurant, sleeping on a property room to see what a guest saw at 6 in the morning when the light was wrong in the bathroom and the ventilation made a sound it shouldn't. Then I made a plan. Not a big plan, a specific one. I fixed the things I could fix in 30 days, showed the staff that the changes were real and would stick, asked the best people what they needed and gave it to them when I could, and told them plainly when I couldn't. 14 months later, we were in the first quality quartile, and I had learned more about what a hotel actually is than in the previous 10 years combined. The Alderton Grand I came to 6 years before Jamie's wedding, underperforming, which is the polite way to say it was losing money, and guests were rating it poorly, and the previous general manager had left under circumstances the ownership group described as mutual, and which were not mutual. I walked it for a week, same as Phoenix. I made a plan. 2 years later, regional award. The year before Jamie's wedding, one of the top 50 luxury hotels in the country, in a national publication. My name in the lobby on the management placard, my name on the website, my name in the programs for every event held in that ballroom. Jamie had eaten in my restaurant twice, but he'd told me the beef short rib was really good. I'd said thank you. Now let me tell you about Kelsey's mother. Sandra Holloway had been planning this wedding since approximately the week after Jamie proposed, which I know because Kelsey told me, laughing, that her mom had a shared folder ready within 48 hours. Sandra was an event coordinator by profession, warm and capable, the kind of woman who runs things with a legal pad and a Bluetooth headset, and the particular energy of someone for whom the world is a series of logistics problems to be solved. I liked Sandra. I want to say that clearly. She was efficient, and she was kind, and she genuinely loved her daughter and wanted the wedding to be beautiful, and by all accounts, the wedding was going to be very beautiful. What Sandra did not know was that the venue she had booked, the Alderton Grand Ballroom, was run by me. She had dealt with my events director, a woman named Philippa who has worked with me for 4 years and is extraordinary at her job. All vendor coordination, timeline management, catering dialogue, florals, lighting, sound, all of it had gone through Philippa. My name was on the property website and in the hotel lobby and on the management placard by the front desk, but it had never come up in the wedding planning conversations because Philippa ran those conversations, and there was no reason for Sandra to look further up the org chart than Philippa. When Jamie came to my kitchen that Sunday and told me I'd be perfect for cleaning up because I was good at cleaning, Sandra had been working with the Alderton Grand for 7 months. She had never connected the hotel to me. She didn't know what I did. She had a folder full of correspondence with Philippa and a signed contract with the hotel's events department, and zero information about the woman who'd been present at every family dinner for 6 years. I said okay, and I drove to work. Philippa was in her office when I arrived, reviewing the weekend's event sheets with the focused calm of someone who keeps 4 things in her head simultaneously and never drops any of them. She looked up when I knocked, and then she looked more carefully, because I had the face I have when something has happened that I am in the process of handling. "The Holloway Tran wedding," I said. "Pull the file." She pulled it without asking why. That's 9 years of working together in the gesture. I sat across from her and read through it for 15 minutes. Not skimming, reading the way I read contracts and inspection reports, which is to say, completely. The timeline, the room layout, the catering selections, the vendor access schedule, the name on the groom's family coordination field, which was blank. Of course it was blank, because the groom's family coordinator had been assigned to wipe down tables. "Who is listed as the day of family contact on our end?" I asked. "Sandra Holloway, bride's mother." "And the groom's family contact?" Philippa checked again, already knowing the answer from the way I'd asked. "There isn't one." I nodded. "A few things. First, I'd like a hospitality suite added for the groom's family for the day. The Alderton suite, if it's available." She checked. "It's open." "Add it. Complimentary, under my authorization. Make sure it's stocked the same way we do the bridal suite. Champagne, flowers, the full arrangement." I paused. "His aunt is flying in from Portland. She's older, has some mobility issues. Make sure the room is accessible and that there's someone to help with her luggage without her having to ask." Philippa was writing. She didn't ask how I knew about the aunt. I'd met her at a family dinner 2 years prior, and she'd mentioned Portland and her hip. "Second, I want to be added to the official contact sheet as the hotel's senior management liaison for the event." "That's not unusual for a GM to be listed," Philippa said. "No," I agreed. "It's just never come up before." She made the note. "Third, the groom's mother should appear in the printed program, the way the mother of the groom appears in every program we produce, in the family section, not in the venue staff section." Philippa looked up at that one. She looked at me for a moment, reading the situation the way she always does, from the outside in. She is very good at not asking things she doesn't need to ask. "I'll make sure it's corrected before printing," she said. "Thank you. I want to be honest about what I did next, because there's a version of this story where I made it punishing, where I rearranged things to embarrass Jamie or Sandra or give myself some visible, dramatic moment. I didn't. I am a hotel general manager. My job is to make events run beautifully. So what I did was make it run beautifully in a way that was accurate. I had Philippa add me to the official wedding program contact sheet as the hotel's senior management liaison, which was simply a fact that had not been communicated. I arranged for the groom's immediate family to have a private hospitality suite for the day, something the bride's family had and the groom's family had not been offered. I requested that the family portrait groupings for the evening's printed program reflect actual family roles, which meant that Jamie's mother would appear where a groom's mother appears in a wedding program, as a parent of the groom, not as venue staff. Then I called Jamie. "I've looked at everything," I said. "I want you to know that the day is going to go beautifully." "Oh, good," he said, relieved in the easy way of a man who'd handed something off and was glad to hear it was handled. "So you're all set with the cleaning stuff?" "There won't be any cleaning for me to do," I said. "The Alderton's housekeeping team handles all of that. They're very good. I trained the department head myself." A pause. Small one. "Mom, what do you mean you trained the department head?" "I mean, I'm the general manager of the Alderton Grand," I said. "I have been for 6 years. Your rehearsal dinner is in my restaurant. Your guests are sleeping in my rooms tonight." Your wedding is in my ballroom tomorrow. The silence on his end was the kind that has a texture to it, not empty, full, of someone rapidly recalculating. You're the... He stopped. Mom, you're the GM. Yes. Of the Alderton Grand. Yes, Jamie. Since when? 6 years, I said. Before that, I ran a property in Phoenix for 4 years. Before that, I was on the leadership team at a hotel in the Bay Area. I've been in hotel management for over 2 decades. I started as a room attendant when you were an infant. He said nothing for a long time. I thought you were in, like, operations, middle management or something. No, I said. And the Alderton is... Kelsey looked at 6 venues before we booked it. It's one of the best hotels in the city. Yes, I said. And you run it. I run it. Another silence. Then, I asked you to wipe tables. You did. I heard him exhale. A long one. Why didn't you tell me? And here is the thing. Here is the thing I had been sitting with for 2 days before that call. You never asked, I said. In 29 years, Jamie. Not once. You knew I worked in hotels. You knew I wore professional clothes and came home tired and had calls on weekends, but you never followed any of that further. You never asked what my title was, or what a general manager actually does, or how many people work for me, or what it took to get here from where I started. When you needed someone to manage service staff at your wedding, you thought of me because the only picture you had of me involved cleaning, and you'd never looked closely enough to see that was the wrong picture by about 30 years. I let that land. I'm not angry, I said, before he could say anything. I want to be clear about that. Angry would mean I think you did this on purpose, and you didn't. You were thoughtless. There's a difference, and thoughtless is the kind of thing that can change. I'm sorry, he said, quietly. Not the deflecting kind of sorry, the kind that means it. I know you are, I said. Now come find me at the reception and ask me anything. The real questions. I've been waiting 29 years to answer them. The wedding was beautiful. The Alderton Grand does not know how to do anything other than beautiful, and Philippa had built an event that used the ballroom exactly the way it deserved to be used. Lighting that made the flowers look like they were glowing from inside. A dinner service so smooth the guests probably didn't notice it was happening. A dance floor that stayed full for 2 hours. I was there as a guest and the hotel's general manager, which meant I was in both places simultaneously, which is actually the job description on most days. Sandra Holloway found me during the cocktail hour. She had been given the corrected program at the start of the evening and had clearly spent some time since then recalibrating. She came to where I was standing near the window, champagne in hand, wearing the look of a woman who has just done a rapid internal audit and found a significant gap. You're Gloria Tran, she said, not accusatory, the tone of someone reading a name on a building they've walked past 100 times without registering it. I am, I said. You run this hotel. I do. She was quiet a moment, scanning what that meant across the past 7 months of her planning. 7 months of correspondence with Philippa, 7 months of walking into the Alderton Grand for venue tours and tastings and walkthroughs, 7 months of building an event in a building whose manager she hadn't once been introduced to or thought to ask about. My daughter's husband asked you to help reset tables, she said. He did. She shook her head. Not at me, but at the situation, at the particular geometry of it. I've been coordinating events for 22 years. I should have introduced myself to senior management the first week. I didn't know to look. She paused. No, that's not right. I should have looked regardless. I'm sorry. You didn't know because nobody told you, I said. That's not yours. She studied me for a moment. You could have said something. When Jamie came to you with this idea. Yes, I said. Why didn't you? I thought about that honestly, the way I try to be honest about the choices I make. Because I wanted to understand what my son thought of me, I said, and I got a very clear answer, and then I wanted him to understand what I actually am. The best way to do that wasn't to tell him, it was to show him what happened when he assumed I was available to wipe tables. Sandra looked at me for a long time. Then she raised her glass. "To women who build things," she said. I raised mine. "To women who build things," we drank. After a moment, she said, "Philippa is extraordinary, by the way. Your events director." "She is," I said. "I hired her 4 years ago from a competitor. Best decision I made that year. You can tell her I said so." "I will," I said. And I did. The next morning, first thing. The wedding was beautiful. The Alderton Grand does not know how to do anything other than beautiful, and Philippa had built an event that used the ballroom exactly the way it deserved to be used. I want to describe it because it matters that I saw it, that I was present for it as a mother, and not as the woman holding the mop. The lighting was the warm amber I'd specifically requested of the AV team 2 days prior. The florals were lower than the fashion ran that year, which was Kelsey's preference and which I agreed with, because low florals let people see each other across the table. The service staff moved through the room with the kind of invisible precision that only happens when people feel respected in their jobs and know exactly what's expected of them. Philippa had briefed the entire floor team personally. I knew because I'd asked. I was there as a guest and as the general manager, which meant I was watching 2 things simultaneously: my son getting married and my hotel performing. Both were doing well. The particular pride of seeing both at once was something I hadn't anticipated and don't have a clean word for. The groom's family suite, the Alderton suite, which I'd added complimentary under my authorization, had been used all afternoon. Kelsey's sister had come and gone. Jamie's aunt had cried in the sitting room and then fixed her makeup in the mirror and come out ready. I walked through it between the ceremony and the cocktail hour, just to see it, and there was a lipstick mark on one of the champagne glasses that made me feel more than I expected to, the evidence of women getting ready together, in a room that I had arranged for them to have. The first dance was a song I didn't know. Kelsey and Jamie moved around the floor with the careful happiness of 2 people who have practiced something and are grateful it's going the way they practiced it. I stood near the edge of the room with a glass of champagne and watched my son be a husband, which is a thing I had thought about in the abstract for years and had never quite pictured until that moment. He looked like himself. He looked like the boy who used to fall asleep in my car on the way home from my mother's, and he looked like the man he'd decided to become, and both of those things were in the same face at the same time, and I was glad I was in the room for it. He found me after the first dance. He'd had an hour since our phone call to sit with everything, and he came with the look of a man who'd been sitting with something heavy and was ready to try to set it down. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said. "Not for not knowing, for not asking. Those are different things." "Yes," I said. "They are. I should have asked. I should have asked a long time ago." He looked at the room around us, the room his wedding was happening in, the room his mother ran. "What is it actually like? The job. What's the best part?" I looked at my son, and I thought about Mrs. Okafor, and I thought about 14 months in Phoenix, and I thought about the night before we won the regional award, when I walked the entire property by myself at midnight, checking that everything was right. "The best part," I said, "is walking a room before an event and knowing it's ready, knowing that every person who walks in is going to feel taken care of without knowing why, that the work is in the room and the room is right." He nodded slowly. "Like tonight. Like tonight." We stood there for a moment, watching Kelsey dance with her father, the light doing the thing I'd specifically requested of the AV team 2 days prior, the warm amber that makes skin glow and flowers look alive. "Will you tell me more?" he said. "About the job, about all of it." "Yes," I said. "Ask me anything," he asked. For an hour, between the toasts and the cake and the last dance, he asked. About the Alderton and the Phoenix Hotel, and Mrs. Okafor, and the years with the cart, and the 14 months of turning around a property that had forgotten what it was supposed to be. He asked with the attention of someone who had decided, definitively and finally, to look. I answered everything. I did not rush, and I did not condense, and I did not make it easy. He'd had 29 years of easy. This was the real version, and he stayed for every word. After the last dance, after the guests drifted out and the catering team began the quiet work of clearing, I walked the ballroom. I always do this, at the end of every event on my property, not to supervise, just to see the room before it goes back to being itself. The flowers were still on the tables, slightly loosened from the evening's warmth. The floor held the marks of 4 hours of dancing. The centerpieces Kelsey had chosen were exactly right, more visible now that the room had emptied, the work showing clearly in the frame, the cleared space made for it. This room had held my son's wedding tonight, in a ballroom I built back from a third quartile property into something people chose for the most important days of their lives, and I had been here for it, as his mother and as its general manager, which turned out not to be two separate things at all. I stood there for a few minutes in the quiet, then I turned off the lights and drove home. A month after the wedding, he called me on a Tuesday morning. He'd started a new job, a lateral move in his industry that he was thinking through, and he called to ask what I thought. Not Kelsey, not his friends, me. We talked for 45 minutes about the new role, about the organization, about what it meant to move sideways instead of up, and when that was the right call, I gave him the honest assessment, not the motherly one, the same assessment I'd give to a member of my leadership team who came to me with the same question. When we finished, he said, "This was really helpful. I should have been calling you for this for years." "Yes," I said. "You should have. I'm going to start." "Good," I said. He did. He calls on Tuesdays sometimes, not every week, but regularly, with the specific kind of question that means he's been thinking about it before he dials. Career questions, management questions, once a question about a difficult conversation with a colleague that I could help him think through because I'd been having difficult conversations with colleagues for 3 decades. Each time, I give him the real answer, not the softened one. He is learning who I am, slowly, in the way people learn things they should have learned earlier, with the particular seriousness of someone who understands they're making up for lost time. It is not a perfect reckoning, but it is a real one, and that, I have decided, is enough to build from. Here is what I want to say before I go, and I'll say it plain. I said to Jamie on the phone that I wasn't angry. I was tired. There's a difference worth naming. Anger has an object. You're angry at a person, at a choice, at an injustice you can point to. Anger asks to be acknowledged and addressed. Tiredness is different. Tiredness is what accumulates when something should have changed and hasn't, and you've been patient through enough cycles of it that the patience itself has become an erosion. I wasn't angry at Jamie. He hadn't chosen to misunderstand me. He'd just never chosen to really look. Wandered into an incomplete picture and stayed because no one asked him to move. The 31 minutes were not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I arranged the hospitality suite and added my name to the program, not to make Jamie feel small, but because they were right. Because the mother of the groom should be treated the way the mother of the groom is treated, because accuracy is its own reason. The 31 minutes were just me doing my job. The only difference was that this time, someone who mattered saw me do it. The people who underestimate you have usually made one of 2 mistakes. They decided what you were before they had the full picture, or they had the picture and didn't look at it. My son made the second kind, which is harder to sit with, because there's no excuse of missing information. But it's also the kind that comes from neglect rather than contempt, and neglect, once it knows itself, can choose differently. He chose differently. Slowly, the way real change happens. Tuesday calls with real questions. Kelsey asking about Mrs. Okafor at Christmas because he'd told her the story, and she wanted to hear it directly. Small things that are not small, the kind that build something over time if you let them. If someone in your life has you in a frame that's too small, the frame is not the verdict. You don't have to burn it. You just have to give them new information and see what they do with it. Some people update, some people don't. You find out, and you build from there. Before you go, subscribe to this channel. Every story here is for the person who has been doing the actual complicated necessary work and still got handed the wrong role at the event that was supposed to honor them. Hit the button, because this is the place where the real work speaks for itself. My name is Gloria. I run a 412-room hotel. I taught myself this job from the card up, and I have never, not once, needed anyone to tell me which rooms were ready.